Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm joined by Adam Gwon, who is an American composer whose song is featured on 16 Stories, which is a new album that was released through Broadway Records, featuring 16 musical theatre composers from around the world. And as I say, it is available on Broadway Records, and the link is down below. Adam, thank you for joining me today. Can you start by introducing yourself and telling me a bit about 16 Stories, the album, and your track that's been selected for it?
Sure. Well, I'm Adam Gwon, as you so eloquently stated. I'm talking to you from New York City, where I live. And yeah, this 16 Stories album, the idea for it came about several years ago. I was approached by a fantastic guy named Michael Kirker, who is the head of musical theater for an organization over here called ASCAP, which is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. And Michael Kirker is this fantastic champion of new musical theater writers, sort of as part of and in addition to his role as the head of musical theater at ASCAP. He's one of those people that I feel like every musical theater writer who has come up in the world has had some reason to thank Michael Kirker along the way. He's not, a lot of people outside that circle, I think, don't really know him, but he's one of those sort of like insider, wonderful, amazing people. And he reached out with this about this album, and he was connecting a number of musical theater composers with an orchestra in Australia who had this idea to record new songs that had not been recorded before, orchestrate them for this full symphony orchestra to perform. And in addition, hold this worldwide search for vocalists, so that it was, we were sort of able to discover exciting new vocalists from all around the world. So that's how I came to be part of this project, through Michael Kirker. And then the song of mine that if I'm remembering correctly, because it was a few years ago now, they asked us to submit a few options for songs, and then the conductor of the orchestra sort of put together the collection of 16 so that it made a satisfying album amongst all the songs that were presented. And the song of mine that they chose is a song that was cut from a musical of mine called Scotland, PA, which premiered right before the pandemic shut everything down about two and a half years ago now. And so, yeah, so the song of mine on the album is called Good Enough for Me, and it was cut from this musical, Scotland, PA.
Amazing. As you say, kind of you've answered kind of like a couple of questions already, so. But kind of as you say, how did you kind of go about selecting those songs to put forward? I know obviously, like, were they all from Scotland, PA, or was it kind of a mix of?
They weren't. I think I submitted a mix of things, and they were all songs that I just had a fondness for, but hadn't been recorded yet. Either they were from projects in development or projects that had sort of fallen through the cracks. So yeah, I think I submitted 3 songs, and they were all from different musical projects.
And the song is performed by Anne Gasco on the album. I think I've got that right. Did you kind of have were you involved with that selection process then as well?
We weren't really. Once we turned our songs over to the orchestra, they really took everything and ran with it. So the first thing that they did was arrange everything for symphony orchestra. So we got to hear those tracks, and they do. I think if you look online, they have kind of some behind the scenes making of videos where you get to see the orchestra playing in the recording studio. So that was the first part. I made some just like basic piano tracks that were sent out to the singers who were applying for the recording spots. but the selection process really fell to the folks over in Australia. And so I connected with Anne for the first time after she had gotten the job.
Amazing. Is that kind of obviously, then it's obviously exciting for you because then you get to meet kind of, as you say, you get into someone kind of the other side of the world, I suppose, as well.
It's true. Yeah. And this is all happening, before the pandemic. So it was really before this idea of, Zooming and collaborating with people anywhere in the world was part of our daily business.
Yeah.
So it was really novel and really exciting to suddenly have, I believe Anne is from Australia. And so it was very exciting to suddenly be able to collaborate not only with this symphony orchestra in Australia, but these vocalists from Australia and in fact from all over the world.
And I thought it'd be quite fun to delve into a little bit more about the show because it sounds fascinating because obviously it's inspired by a film, but that's based on Shakespeare's Macbeth, right?
Exactly, yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about Scotland, PA?
Yeah, so the idea for the project was brought to me by a playwright named Michael Mitnick, who ended up writing the book for the musical. And he had seen this film when he was growing up, when he was a teenager, and it had just sort of lodged in his mind that it could make a good musical. But he was, a teenager, and so he didn't quite know what to do with that thought yet. And so fast forward many years, he is in grad school studying to be a playwright. One of his teachers in grad school was the fantastic playwright Paula Vogel, and Paula Vogel taught a class about adaptation. So they looked at a number of plays, movies that were adaptations of other source material, and one of the films that came up in the class was this film Scotland, PA, because it's a very funny, very smart adaptation of, as you say, Shakespeare's Macbeth. It takes the story and sets it in the 1970s in a very small town in Pennsylvania, where all of the characters work at a burger shop. And so Duncan the King is the sort of tyrannical owner of this hamburger restaurant. Mac and his wife, who's named Pat in the film and in the musical, are kind of low-level employees who have been stuck in this dead-end job since they were in high school. And they are suddenly bitten with this thirst for more. Bitten by the bug of ambition, and bad things happen, as they do in the Shakespeare play. But it's set in this very funny world with this incredibly oddball cast of characters, and it's funny and it's dark and just really, really charming. And so Michael, in this class in grad school, was reminded of this film. And so Michael and I were connected by the Roundabout Theatre company here. They thought we might get on as collaborators and work well together. So we met up, and he mentioned his idea, which had been born years ago when he was a teenager, of adapting this film into a musical. And I'd never heard of the film. It's become this sort of cult classic, but at the time was sort of difficult to find. I remember I had to sort of search like the used DVD section on Amazon to find it. And one of my points of pride about the musical is that it got the film producers to release the movie on Netflix. So you can watch it on Netflix now. But yeah, so that's how the musical came up. I watched the film at Michael's suggestion, agreed that I thought it was really funny, really kind of epic emotionally, which I think makes for a good reason for stories to sing, and would just be a lot of fun to work on.
Amazing. Kind of obviously for your career, is it then like more challenging to write or compose for stories that are kind of adaptations, or is it then kind of original stories? Is it kind of different process you go through, or is it kind of similar?
Yeah, I think there are differences. I think they each have their own challenges. I think the challenge with a completely original story is that the possibilities are endless. You can do anything. And so how do you know what to do? But at the same time, that's sort of the great joy and the great excitement of doing something completely original, which you have so much freedom to, break down the rules and tell stories in really interesting ways. And with an adaptation, the nice thing is that you at least have a foundation of something to start with. And I think the challenge that comes in with an adaptation is that you always want to make it your own and feel like you have the freedom to veer from the source material, make changes so that if you're making a musical out of a film, say, the musical kind of stands on its own, is its own creation that doesn't rely on previous knowledge of the source material. And I do feel like in the adaptation process, there's always a moment. I always feel like when I start, I'm sort of too faithful to the source material, because obviously there's something about it that I really love that speaks to me, which is why I'm interested in adapting it. And there always comes a point where I have to say, Adam, stop being so nice and so gentle with the source material. Break it apart, make it your own. So getting to that moment can be a challenge, but once you sort of like hit that stride, it can be really fun to take something that exists and spin it into something different.
Yeah, and kind of like, say like Scotland Play, would then like you lose like words from the script and then turn them into songs, or is it kind of like, does it just get inspired from the kind of moments in the film?
It's a little bit of both. There are some songs where, there are lines from the original screenplay like turned into a lyric in a song. And then, we also made wild changes to, the plot of our Act 2 veers pretty wildly from the plot in the movie. We like combined characters in the musical, so there are like 2 characters in the movie that we combined into one. We turned one male character into a female character. So there are all kinds of different ways that the songs emerged from the film.
And is the kind of, hopefully, as you say, it was obviously premiered just before the pandemic, 2019. Is there kind of future hope for it?
I hope so. Yeah, we opened off Broadway at the Roundabout here right before the pandemic, and we've now been working with a commercial producer to hopefully give the show some more life. We had some plans that obviously sort of were scuttled when everything shut down, but are still working with these producers to find our next steps and have something coming up in a few months. So. Fingers crossed, there'll be more Scotland PA for everyone to see. Fingers crossed,
because it sounds brilliant. And you're arguably most known for Ordinary Days, which I can't believe 2009 it was premiered.
I know, I can't believe it either.
You don't look old enough either, to be fair. So,
thank you.
You must have been young, but kind of that's been staged internationally, kind of even in London. Kind of, how do you kind of reflect back now? That's what 13, 14 years ago, kind of, how do you reflect kind of your journey since then?
Yeah, I mean, that piece was sort of my breakthrough show in terms of, it was my first show to be professionally produced. I think it was the third like full musical that I had written, and some of those had gotten workshops or been performed in festivals, but Ordinary Days was the one that kind of broke through and was the first one to get professionally produced, and it still feels like a very personal piece to me. Like I wrote it reflecting a very specific time and place in my life, and so it's both wonderful and totally surprising that this story and this piece that feels so specific and personal to me has connected with so many people around the world. That I think that's the wild thing about it. Just the fact, because it feels so connected to a moment in my own life, and to imagine that those experiences and those questions and those thoughts resonate with so many other people, and now essentially a whole other generation of people. I mean, it's 13 years ago, so there are people who are teenagers now who are just discovering the show. So it's like a whole, it's trickled down to the next generation, which is like such a wonderful, strange thing to have had happen.
Yeah. And of course, kind of then what inspires you to, when you're writing, I guess kind of like you say, Ordinary Days, kind of like it was like a specific time, or Scotland PA, kind of obviously it's inspired by the film, but what kind of inspires you when you're composing?
All kinds of things, to be perfectly honest. There are some projects. I think Ordinary Days, for example, is one that I wrote entirely on my own without collaborators, and I'm working on a new one of those right now. And I think those tend to be the most personal. Those are the ones where I'm sort of mining my own life and my own experience the most, to write those. And other projects, I'm drawn to all kinds of different things. Obviously, it's whatever I can find that personal connection with, even if it's not directly pulled from my own life. Like with Scotland PA, this, the idea of being ambitious, and is it a good thing or a bad thing to be ambitious? And at what point does being ambitious in a good way become being ambitious in a bad way? And are we as a society doing it all wrong? Like those are the kinds of questions that resonated with me when I think about Scotland PA or Macbeth. And every project I think has that kind of hook for me, that kind of question or idea that I feel like I can live with for many, many years, investigating, because musicals take a while to write and to find their way to the stage. And I also really love collaborators. I think Michael is a great example, like finding a playwright who I really connect with and whose work I love and whose voice I find really interesting. I get really excited thinking about, what will my voice as a songwriter combined with their voice as a playwright? What kind of world will that create? And so I think that's a source of inspiration for me as well, finding the right collaborator and seeing what kind of projects will evolve from that collaboration.
Yeah, and for people who aren't composers, like myself, where does the kind of creative process start? Do you kind of start with melody, or is it lyrics, or is it kind of a mixture?
I think for me, because I most of the time do music and lyrics together, they're very entwined in my brain. So it's rare that I will write a melody that doesn't have some kind of lyric attached to it, and it's also rare that I'll write a lyric without some sort of melody attached to it. And one or both of those things will change along the way. But in terms of like the first seed of something, it usually is like a lyric and a melodic phrase combined. And I kind of see where that idea will take me in terms of writing a song.
Yeah. And this is kind of a big question. How important was obvious? It's an obvious answer, really, but it's very important. But how important do you think that audiences and kind of producers take chances on new musicals?
Oh, I think it's vital. I think, and strangely, I think especially for audiences, because I think there will always be theaters and producers sort of dedicated to producing premieres and championing new voices and putting them on stage. And I certainly think there should be more of them always. Yeah. But I really, I want to, I think my biggest fear in terms of the future of new musicals is that that audiences become less risk-taking in terms of, only wanting to see things that they are familiar with, jukebox musicals, musicals adapted from, marquee name films, which is not to say there's anything wrong with those, that those can be wonderful. But I think for a lot of like sort of the general theater audience, the idea of, what a musical has almost become exclusively that kind of show. Yeah. And I hope that we continue to grow audiences who take a chance and see something that they know nothing about. Because I think for me, it's those pieces that were sort of more under the radar, less kind of like blockbuster shows, were the ones that really inspired me and like stay with me and live with me. And I love the big shows, and they impact me as well. But the ones that I feel like have stuck around and like informed who I am as a human have been those experiences that I didn't see coming, that I just didn't expect. And so I hope audiences continue to stay open to that kind of stuff.
I agree wholeheartedly. Now I'm going to move on to, I call them quickfire questions, but you don't have to answer them quickfire if you don't want to. But these it's up to you. It's up to you.
I'm getting ready.
These are more just kind of fun, stupid questions, some of them. So prepare. What was the first piece of theatre that you can remember seeing in your lifetime?
Oh, when I was a kid, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and there was a children's theater called the Pumpkin Theater, which I think is still around. And they basically staged stage adaptations of fairy tales for little kids. It was theater for a young audience. And those were I remember my parents taking me to those shows. And I remember waiting afterward with the like photocopied program to get the actors to sign the program. Yeah, I think that's the first theater I remember, the Pumpkin Theater in Baltimore, Maryland.
Amazing. And what would be your favorite piece of theatre that you've seen to date?
Oh gosh, to date. One that was particularly memorable, this was years ago. This was probably also around like 2008, 2009-ish. Yeah. I won a ticket lottery to see the very first preview of the play Circle Mirror Transformation by Annie Baker at Playwrights Horizons here. And I remember getting to the theater, and it was well before, I don't think it was her first play, but it was well before, it was before she won the Pulitzer and before she sort of became more widely known. It was in a very small theater. It was sort of like the upstairs theater at Playwrights Horizons. And I remember getting to the theater. Again, it was this brand new play, the first preview, didn't know anything about it. I remember showing up at the theater, and there was a sign at the entrance that said, "This play runs 2 hours and 10 minutes with no intermission." And I was like, what have I gotten myself into? But went in and watched the play, and for 2 hours and 10 minutes straight was just like totally enraptured by this play. And I still think that the ending, I don't know if you're familiar with that play, but that there's this sort of magical moment at the end of this play it literally brought me to tears when I was watching this at the first preview. And it's like it's like a theatrical moment that has really stuck with me, and I think actually like informed a lot of my own writing. It was just sort of like this, one of my favorite moments of theater was the seeing the end of that play. I won't give it away for people who don't know it.
Amazing. This is totally more abstract, but what was the last song you can remember listening to?
Oh, the last song. Oh, I feel like I should check my Apple Music and see what the last played was. I think I think it was? I think it was a Lizzie McAdams song, which is sort of random, but like I think on my Apple Music I have like, she has a new album coming out, and I have it set to download, and they like released one of the tracks yesterday. Yeah. And so I think that was probably the last song that I listened to. But I'm a big fan of hers. I love her lyrics and her storytelling. I just think it's really wonderful.
Amazing. Mine was Summer of '69, because I had Bryan Adams on.
Fantastic.
I'm going to see him next month, so I'm kind of getting in the mood.
Oh, cool.
Getting in the mood. What was the last TV show you binged?
Oh, I just finished Station 11, which is on HBO, which is it's actually theater adjacent. It's adapted from a novel that's kind of like basically like a post-apocalyptic kind of thing. But the main character in the novel and in this TV adaptation is part of a traveling theater company that in this post-apocalyptic world, this theater company travels around to all of the little colonies and performs Shakespeare. Yeah. It's interesting. I remember I read the book several years ago when it came out, and enjoyed it. Like it was fun. It was an entertaining read, but it didn't really stick with me much. And I just thought this TV adaptation was spectacular. Like it resonated with me so much. And I guess it kind of hits differently now because it's about a pandemic that like wipes out most of the world.
Yeah.
But seeing the world come to life in this adaptation where, you know, this theater troupe has put together a whole theater company, you know, with like found material because it's after the world has ended. And so they build all the costumes out of like objects that they find. And it just like, I just thought it was a beautiful testament to human creativity. And that even in the most dire of circumstances, when like literally the world ends, we like have to find food, water, and shelter, and we still have our creativity. Like we still have this urge to create and make beautiful things. And I just thought that was such a powerful story to tell in this moment. So I recommend it. Station 11.
Amazing. I've not heard of it, but I'm going to hopefully check if it's on over here because we obviously get.
It's great. Yeah, I don't know if it's on outside of the States, but worth checking out if it is.
I will give it a go. What would be? Doesn't have to be career based, but it can be. What would be one thing on your bucket list?
Oh, you know, I really want to see the Northern Lights. That is on my bucket list. I took a trip to Iceland specifically to see the Northern Lights and didn't see them. Like they just didn't show up. So it's still on my list. I still would like to see the Northern Lights sometime.
That's amazing. Who is your kind of biggest inspirations in your life?
Oh, you know, a really early inspiration for me, it was and is Tori Amos. She is also from Baltimore, Maryland, and in fact studied piano at the same. No, I didn't study piano at the same school as her, but I took singing lessons at the same music school that she studied at in Baltimore. And she's always been a big inspiration. I remember when I discovered her music when I was in high school. I was a piano player, like I was taking classical piano lessons and then heard her music, which was like using piano in like a cool way. Like she was making piano cool. And so she's been a huge inspiration from like the very beginning, even sort of before I got into theater, just like when I was doing music and piano. I just loved Tori Amos.
Yeah. And this doesn't have to be to work in all, it can be series in the show, but what would be just generally your favourite theatre to visit?
Oh, you know, here in New York, I love the space at New York Theatre Workshop, which is, it's an off-Broadway theater where famously Rent premiered back in the day. And they just have a gorgeous theater. It's like, it's pretty intimate. It's probably like 250 seats or something like that, but feels very expansive. Like the playing space is very big. And also the walls of the theater are these like enormous exposed brick walls, which are just beautiful. And in fact, many of the productions there, the design kind of incorporates the architecture of the theater into them because the theater is so striking. And so I love going to see things there because it feels like, I just love the way it feels like you're aware that you're in this awesome space, but also get transported to the whatever world the show is taking you to. And I think that's cool.
If you weren't a composer, what do you think you'd be doing with your life?
That is an excellent question. When I was a child, I had two aspirations. One was to be an oceanographer because I was obsessed with like creatures that lived in the sea. And the other one was I wanted to be a roller coaster designer because I was and still am a bit obsessed with roller coasters. And I actually like that one I kind of considered pursuing. But then I realized that you had to basically become an engineer, which means you had to like dedicate your life to math, and I was not prepared to do that. So now I just enjoy riding roller coasters as opposed to building them.
There needs to be like a like a theatre Disneyland, doesn't there? Really, that's what we need.
Yes, oh, that would be amazing.
You can have a ride based on your career. You see,
Exactly.
You can design it. There we go.
But add that to the bucket list.
You may say Tori Amos to this, but who is your favourite musician?
Oh, I would probably say Tori Amos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably. I'll double down and Tori Amos on that one.
If you're watching, there you go. What was the last book that you read?
The last book that I read. Oh gosh, it wasn't that long ago. I just can't remember what it is. I am in the mid. I know what I'm reading now, but I haven't finished it yet. Is a book called Something Unbelievable, which I've become a sort of compulsive book buyer during the pandemic because I started getting. I didn't start, but I get the emails from like our local bookstores. And of course, among the many things that I was nervous would like completely evaporate from the face of the earth, that everything shut down, I was like, not our local bookstores. Yeah. So I just started like buying books that they would recommend in their weekly emails. And this was one of them. And strangely, so I have an incredibly long backlog of books to read because of this habit I've developed. And so I bought this particular book, Something Unbelievable, like probably a year and a half ago, and only just started reading it now. But weirdly, it's kind of two alternating storylines. One is a grandmother who lives in Ukraine who's telling her story of escaping the Ukraine during World War II to her granddaughter, who is an actress who lives in New York City. And so it sort of alternates between those two stories. But it's such a strange coincidence reading this book right now, and this, hearing the story about, being persecuted by like Hitler in Germany in World War II and having to flee Ukraine while all this stuff is happening right now. It's a wild coincidence because I bought this book a while ago. So that's what I'm in the middle of. I hope that counts as an answer to the question, since I can't remember the one I finished before this.
That does count. That's the problem with kind of read too many books. Like you kind of forget.
It's true. They all start to blur together at a certain point. They
do. What does theatre mean to you?
Oh gosh. I think to me, the thing that has emerged to me that's the part of theater that I enjoy the best these days is that it's a chance to like bring all these different people you love into one room together. And I think that's particularly what I've missed during the shutdown, is that for me, theater, the heart of theater and what makes it so special and so meaningful to me, is that it's this communal thing that from the moment you get into the rehearsal room to the moment you're in a theater in production, it's like you become the host of a party and you're like welcoming your friends to come see this thing. You're welcoming this incredible artist to come join you in this room and make something. So I think at the end of the day, that I think is what fills me up the most about being a theater maker. And I think is why the past couple of years have been really, really hard, because that aspect of it it went away for a while.
Yeah. This is a difficult one. Can you describe yourself in 5 words?
Oh gosh. Oh, this is the question. This is like this is the tough question. Yeah. It's funny because I always like other, like, leave the description for other people to describe. So like when people say describe your music, I'm like, I don't know, I just write it, and like you tell me what does it sound like to you. Let me see if I can do 5 words that describe me without being a total cop-out. I guess I would say I'm an optimist at the end of the day, which I don't think is like a simpler, cheesy thing to be. I think like being an optimist is like a powerful choice to make in the world. So I would say I'm an optimist. I would say I strive to be kind. I think when a lot of people are asked to describe me, they say that I'm a kind person. So it's something that I sort of also actively try to be, and something that I think in this collaborative thing we do of theater is an important thing to bring to the table, kindness. It's like a form of generosity that I think is really useful in collaboration. So I would say optimist, kind. I'm definitely introverted. I would throw that in. I'm definitely a card carrying introvert. Yep. Tori Amos fan. Is that a cop out? That's a little bit of a cop out. And for the fifth one, I will say oh gosh, I'm totally stumped.
You can play your own trumpet. I mean, you're talented, so you could say that. You mean?
Oh, that's very kind. I will. I'll take it. I'll take it.
There you go. Yeah, you are. I mean, but what would be the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh, You know, one that immediately comes to mind was when I was much younger. I was very, very shy, in a different way from being an introvert. Like I was shy, and I was afraid to like put myself out there and sort of make it known, like what I wanted or what I wanted to go after. Like if there was an opportunity or something, I would sort of like feel shy about, throwing myself out there for that opportunity. And I remember a teacher of mine saying, well, why do you feel so uncomfortable about putting yourself out there for this kind of thing? And I said, well, I don't want to, I feel like I'm going to seem pushy. I'm going to seem like an asshole. Like I don't want to come across that way. And this teacher said to me, look, Adam, like you as a person are not pushy and are not an asshole. And so asking for something in the way that you will do it, it will not seem pushy or mean. It will come across as who you are, which is like, warm and open and kind. And so that sort of like I remember that transforming something in me, and realizing that, it's interesting that coming from this question of like, describe yourself, because this advice was essentially like, those qualities that make you who you are going to shine through in everything you do. And it was a transformative thought, both, in life and eventually in writing, that like, it's like that amazing Sondheim lyric in Something in the Park with George, let it come from you, then it will be new, true. Sorry, Sondheim. But the idea of like who you are is always going to shine through in whatever you do. And that was a really transformative piece of advice that I got at a young age.
Amazing. And my final question for you is going back to where we begun this conversation. Why should people check out 16 Stories?
Oh, well, like I said before, these are all songs from brand new musicals that you probably haven't heard. And so take a chance, take a risk. You might discover something you love that becomes your new favorite thing. And also it's just super cool to hear new musical theater songs fully orchestrated for a whole symphony orchestra. That's such a rare thing in the theater world these days. And this is such a unique album because of that.
Amazing. Well, Adam, thank you for your time today. If you want to check out 16 Stories, the links are below. I will put links to Adam's I presume you've got a website, have you? Have you a website?
I do, yeah, just adamgwon.com.
Amazing. I'll put the link down below and probably to your social media, all the things like that. It will be below.
Great.
So thank you, Adam, as I say, for your time today. It's been a wonderful chat.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.